This is going to be another video kind of provoked by extensive and futile comment wars with anarcho-syndicalists and other socialists. It's really easy to get addicted to doing that, and I think it's just much more productive to make videos about it. Maybe some anarcho-syndicalists will see it, although I doubt it. If they do, I doubt that they'd be persuaded, but it does help to tell other people and maybe add a little ammunition out there. Now, this is going to be relating to wages, value, prices, and where a lot of the fundamental assumptions of anarcho-syndicalists are erroneous, and so their conclusions they draw from them are also erroneous. Now, the basic one I want to talk about is the idea that workers in wage slavery are being exploited. Now, in our current system, I think that there is an argument that can be made that this is to some degree the case. If you are not allowed to go into certain lines of work, for instance, if you try and start your own business, say you're an African American woman and you want to braid hair, obviously you could get a job with a firm that braids hair, some kind of salon or whatever. Or you could hypothetically start your own business doing that on your own, and then you wouldn't be anyone's wage slave, and if you were doing it by yourself, you wouldn't be a slave master either. But that's not legal, basically. The government has erected barriers to entry, usually at the state level, but also at the federal level. And you can't do that without getting a license, and the license, depending on the state, can be pretty expensive to the point that a lower income person could never even hope to afford it, and even someone who could, it makes it that much more difficult. And so you could say, well, that person is kind of being coerced into having to get a job. The other thing is, basically the government acts as if, it doesn't explicitly claim this, I don't believe, but it basically acts as if it is the owner of all land. All physical land is claimed by some government. And they charge rent. And that rent is only payable in cash. You can't pay in kind. If you're a farmer, the government won't let you pay that. I mean, the fact that you have to pay anything is absurd, but they won't let you pay that in grain or furs or anything. You have to pay that in cash, and so you have to somehow generate cash. I'm all for people, hermits or poor people or people who want to live off the land or that sort of thing, having their own cabin or whatever other accommodations they are able to build and supporting themselves. I think that's great if people want to do that. It's not the lifestyle I really want. But if other people want to choose that, they should be able to. But, you really can't do that because the government will come and say, okay, this is all well and good, but you have to pay us property taxes. And if you don't, you'll get evicted. This is unlike any other, you cannot pay utilities. Like if you don't pay your electric company, they can't evict you unless you live in the city. Then the city has a municipal electric company. They can evict you then. I found that out when I lived in a city. That if you did not pay the monopoly that the city operated on utilities, they would condemn your house and kick you out. But so that kind of forces people to get jobs. You have to somehow generate income, and so there's an argument to be made that people are forced to get jobs in that respect. But the idea then that there's exploitation, or that just the mere fact that you're getting a wage and the employer is also benefiting from that, that's exploitation, is a little silly. Now, the libertarian kind of argument here is, look, if person A and person B make an agreement, say I work so many hours a week in your factory or at your business doing X, Y, and Z, and in return you'll pay me this much money per hour, per day, then a libertarian would say, look, they both agreed, they both voluntarily accepted this agreement, so they both are better off. If they didn't think they were going to be better off, they wouldn't have agreed to the exchange. And this is even with the compulsion to have to work. If you have to get money, we'd all rather just sit and, live in the Garden of Eden, but we can't. And so an option to avoid starvation, if the option to avoid starvation includes getting a wage, then we prefer that to the alternatives. So we make an exchange, and we're happy with it. Now the anarcho-syndicalist socialist says, no, this isn't right, because you work in a factory and you produce X value, this quantity of wealth or this quantity of value, and then the capitalist, the evil employer, whatever class it is that are wishing to rob from, basically, they get the value you created plus X, so they're getting a profit. They're getting enough that they're skimming some off the top, and most socialists would add absurdly that they're not doing anything for it, that they're basically just getting it for nothing, and you should get all of it. And so it's exploitation because you're not getting the full value of your labor. You're working for a boss, and they're paying you $10 an hour, but it's actually worth $12 an hour to them, and so you're just being ripped off. Well, firstly, I've yet to, literally every time I've had a socialist tell me this, they haven't even really done the math right, because they come up with these absurd assumptions, like they totally disregard any capital costs, any upkeep costs, any of the, I never worked in a factory like an auto factory, but I worked at a Krispy Kreme donut, which is basically a donut factory. And I was a cook. I made donuts. I could make 270 dozen donuts per hour. And I'd work a 12-hour shift and I'd spend about 9 to 10 hours making donuts. And I got paid, I think, $9 an hour at that job. And you could say, man, 270 dozen donuts is worth more than $9 an hour. If I on the hour, and I was expected to make that many. That was how many I had to make. If I couldn't make that many, they would fire me and find somebody else. They had a big staff of applications, and when I first started there, I wasn't doing very well, and they actually threatened. They said, hey, we're paying you to be here to make that many. We need that many, so get your act together. And I did. I went home and I thought about how to be more efficient at my job, and and I got there like 10 minutes early the next day and stacked up all the ingredients or whatever. And then the anarcho-syndicalist would look at it and be like, well, 270 dozen donuts, that's not worth $9, that's worth $300. And so we're being ripped off $291 at evil capitalists. But that's just stupid math, because in order for me to make 270 dozen donuts, I don't just do jumping jacks and my labor creates donuts out of the manna of the world. Firstly, there are ingredients. I'd probably use probably about 200 pounds of flour in 1 hour, probably 5 pounds of yeast. These are specialized yeast, specialized flours, a secret mix called the brew, and probably 50 pounds of granulated sugar and 100 pounds of powdered sugar. So those are the ingredients. So that all cost money. Then I had to use very expensive machinery. They had a huge conveyor belt, a gigantic conveyor belt that was on rollers that could actually move the whole thing, but it probably weighed several tons that the donuts would go through, and this would allow them to rise. It would take 45 minutes, although you could adjust it, to go through this humidified, climate-controlled piece of equipment, and at the other end of it, they would fall into a giant fryer. Now, I've worked at fast food for a long time, but this is way more involved than the fryers you see at McDonald's or Burger King, because there's a conveyor belt on this fryer as well. The donuts would fall in it. This fryer has giant coils in it. The coils in this use so much electricity that if there wasn't fryer in it, they would just spontaneously combust the air. We had to be really careful when we cleaned it. And then it would go on a big conveyor belt. And this whole time, this is happening in a big building. The building itself is climate controlled. It's air conditioned in the summer. It's heated in the winter. There's transportation costs. None of this stuff is made here. All this flour is grown in North Carolina, and this equipment, I never saw a price tag, but it would be tens and tens of thousands of dollars for any single piece of this equipment. The store itself, just to be started up, probably cost $500,000. I know that the cost of just keeping the air on was something like $5,000 or $6,000 a week. That was the electric bill. Then, of course, I wasn't the only person who took part in the production. There are people who apply the toppings, the people who retail them, who sell them, who tell the customers. There were the truck drivers who would spend literally 18 hours a night driving these to hundreds of miles away. I couldn't believe how far away that we were delivering donuts. And so it's just completely retarded math to be like, oh, well, they're worth $300 an hour and you're only getting $9 an hour. You got ripped off that much. It's just, to me, that's such an elementary mistake to make. I didn't have to spend any of my money, zero money, to buy any of that capital equipment, to pay the electric bill. And you know what? That Krispy Kreme I worked at, it lost money every single week that it was in business that I worked there. I worked there for 2 years. I think when it first opened, maybe 2 years before that, there was enough interest in it, when it was a novelty, that it may have been in the black, but even then I'm not sure. And did it affect me? No. I was able to pay for college with that. I was able to feed myself and have a car and have an apartment, and the fact that it was actually losing money was completely irrelevant to me as an employee. And then I quit to go do other things, and it actually did go out of business a few months later. So they make a fundamental, I have not met a socialist who doesn't make stupid statements like that and say, oh, look at this worker, he's making $50 sneakers and he's only getting paid $1 a day or whatever. Like, well, he only is making one part of 100 sneakers every day, and he's not making the rubber. He's not running to just ignore all that, to me, is just really, really childish. But then the other thing is, it's really interesting because there's only two ways that socialists will kind of quantify the value of it, and that's either they'll use dollars, they'll use the price, and they'll be like, well, the marginal value of your value to your employer is, say $12 an hour, and I'm only getting paid $9. Or they'll make a generic reference to some other kind of objective theory of value. Almost always it's the labor theory of value. There are probably others, but I almost never hear of them. And there's two problems with that. The labor theory of value is stupid, and it's never explicitly qualified exactly how much something is valuable. You come these funny ideas that, okay, so if I did a lot of hard labor, say grinding rock into sand in harsh conditions, and I was sweating a lot, then that sand would be really valuable because I worked really hard to do it. Whereas on the other hand, if I was walking down some rustic path and I found a 3-pound gold nugget and reached down to pick it up, that 3-pound gold nugget would not really be worth anything because there was almost no labor put into it. There's just so many obvious problems with the labor theory of value, theoretically, and then just practically, how much is it really worth? That's completely ignored. The labor that goes into the capital is completely ignored. The labor of the capitalist, they have to do something. They have to find the customers. They have to accumulate the capital. That's all completely ignored. And then the other way they'll do it is by just looking at prices. And that is also interesting because the only way prices work is with private property and with the market economy. There is no other basis for pricing. And so to reference that is to concede that you don't have a method to measure value. And this is what I ask. They say it's objectively, they're making more money than you're making, or they're making more than they're paying you. Usually it's not that big of a difference because they have to bid up wages to even have employees. But they say it's objectively coercion because there's a higher nominal dollar amount. But then you have to ask, okay, well, so you're basically saying that the dollar value of something is what determines its actual value. If that's the case, then what is the actual value of a dollar or any unit of currency that you could mention? And this is kind of where we get into an infinite redux, where, well, a dollar's worth 100 cents, or a dollar's worth 0.85 euros, or what is a dollar worth? Well, to me, a dollar is worth more than a 8-ounce can of Mellow Yellow, but less than an 8-ounce can of Dr. Pepper right now, because I'm kind of thirsty right now. A dollar to me is worth less than a car, but more than a plastic spider. And so what does that mean is, if I value a dollar more than something, then I would be unwilling to exchange that dollar for that thing. So I value a dollar more than a plastic spider, or a can of Mellow Yellow, or 10 seconds of my labor, and so I won't exchange that. However, I do value an 8-ounce can of Dr. Pepper more than $1 right now, and so I would be willing to exchange it. And so there isn't any kind of subunit of valuation here, which would be necessary for some kind of objective theory of value. You'd have to have a unit of measure. If you're going to talk about some of the objective value, you have to have a unit of measure. Otherwise, you can't be making statements about this is more valuable or this is less valuable. And the thing is, there isn't such a thing. All valuation is not only subjective, but it's cardinal. It's not ordinal. So it's I prefer this to that, but there's no I prefer it twice as much or half as much. It's I prefer A to B. I prefer the dollar to the Coke, or I prefer the car to the $5,500 that I paid for it, or I prefer the college education to the fucking, I don't know, $100,000 I spent on it. And of course, that's all ex ante, that's before the fact, after the fact. As with the college example, you can come to regret that. But at the time, it seemed like the best thing. It seemed like it was a valuable exchange, a worthwhile exchange. And there is no objective way to say, I am wrong or you are wrong. I think it's hilarious that, I'm talking with people who are clearly and sometimes explicitly admitting basically unemployed students in the UK or the US or some other first world country who maybe never held a job in their entire life, or if they did, it was pretty minor, and yet they're in a position to talk about whether workers in Bolivia or Guatemala or Bangladesh, they know their circumstances well enough to know whether they value the jobs in their sweatshops, if it's worth something to them. No, they don't know that. It's all about exchange. If I think that the $9 an hour I was getting at Krispy Kreme is worth the amount of work that I put into it, then it's a fair exchange, regardless of whatever price you want to put on it, market price you want to put in. And it's funny that they either have to refer to a market price, or they have to have some kind of objective theory of value, and they don't have one. There's just questions that immediately, and I've heard them that, they get asked this and they'll say, well, it's based on your time, toil, like how much time, how hard you work, and what are the conditions like. And it's just like, yeah, but how do you measure all that? That's all subjective too. Some people like working in hot weather, and some people like working in cold weather, and some people like doing hard, physical, demanding, dangerous things, because there are people who are adrenaline junkies, and other people don't like doing that. There's some people who like having office jobs where they sit in a chair, and there are other people who find that absolutely frustrating and annoying and terrible. And there's no objective, well, that's wrong and that's right, and it's actually, this is the magic number that it's actually worth, and this anyone who's not accepting that is getting ripped off, and anyone who's accepting more is getting too much. And everybody thinks that they're supposed to get paid more, and so when they say, well, I think these people should get paid more, and they think they should get more, yeah, the capitalists think they should get paid more too. That doesn't mean that they should. It's only what people are able to exchange. If you can't voluntarily exchange for it, then it's not that valuable to other people. And if you do voluntarily exchange for it, then we're both better off from the transaction. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Now, there's this whole very sinister argument, the work for a boss or starve. I kind of talked about it earlier. Like, it's not really voluntary. You're forced into it because if you don't have the money, you'll starve or whatever, which isn't literally true, because there is charity and you can work for yourself, especially if the government's not stopping you. But this is, and I know of, there used to be he deleted his channel, but there was a big Ron Paul supporter, a big libertarian, and he got in debates with Marxists, and he actually was converted by this argument, and it's fucking stupid, because in Marxist utopia, does no one have to work? If we had an anarcho-syndicalist system based on consensus and voting and democracy and all these buzzwords that make people feel good, would nobody have to work? Would we all just be able to sit and have all of our needs, however you want to define them, matriculate to us? No. Someone would have to, and they say, well, no, if you're injured and you can't work, we'd still take care of you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about everybody. Is nobody going to have to work, or is there going to have to be some labor, or else the system won't work and we'll all starve to death? Obviously, there's going to have to be work. There's going to have to be somebody who provides the medical care. Or if you're going to say robots are going to do it, someone's going to have to build the robots at some point. There are no robots right now who are capable of building other robots capable of providing medical care. So, you can't premise your argument on, well, we're going to have Star Trek and all this stuff is just going to exist, and then we're going to go from there. No, that's not a persuasive argument for a system if you have no viable means of attaining that system. I'm sorry, that's just not convincing at all. You want to think about it and dream about it and maybe try and work out a way to make it happen, fine, but to just say, well, we're going to skip that problem and just assume that we already have what we want and then go from there. No, that's the very thing as we're talking about, that you shouldn't assume it because it won't work. People are still going to have to work in a socialist thing. And this is what, you tell them, well, you can get a job, you can make money, and this is the case in the United States and most of the first world. You can do pretty well. Not everyone's going to become a Horatio Alger millionaire, but you can go fast food, anything, start saving. You can live below your means, accumulate wealth. In 2 or 3 years, you can be in a way better position than you were. If you're a hard worker, guarantee eventually you will have better and more remunerative employment. It always happens. Capitalists need laborers, and they bid the price up for ones that are good at it. But they say, well, they're only helping you because you're exchanging something for them. It's conditional. They don't actually say this, but what really bugs them about it is that it's a conditional exchange. You can become successful, but only if you exchange with somebody else. And they prefer a system, this is really weird, where only one party is benefiting, the other party is not benefiting. They don't believe in mutual exchange, they believe in unilateral exchange, but that just does not work. If you say anyone can have whatever they want or whatever the ration of society is unconditionally, then nobody has any incentive to work. No one has any incentive to do anything. This is the most commonly cited, most pervasive problem about socialism is the incentive problem. And so you're going to have to say, listen, if you can work, you have to work. And then all of a sudden, then socialism is just as coercive as capitalism. Because if capitalism is work for a boss or starve, then socialism is join the collective, join the democracy, put your labor towards it, or else starve. Or else we'll give you some tiny little bit of support. But you can't get more than that. Otherwise, there's no reason for any. And this is what happens in all the communes that have existed. You always end up with some people, lazy socialists, who were unemployed college students of sociology or whatever, who don't have any marketable skills and are just too lazy and inept to actually have even low-level jobs, and they end up moving to these communes, and then oh, this is great, it's all for the people, and it's not capitalism, and then they just lay around smoking pot and not working. And then the people in the commune who are trying to make the commune work get pissy about it and okay, this isn't going to work. We have all these people who are just parasites who they're getting something for nothing, and we're not getting anything out of their exchange. And so they always sit them down and they say, okay, you have to shape up or you have to leave, and they kick them out. You think the anarcho-syndicalists of Spain just let people do whatever the fuck they wanted? No. You had to work your ass off or else they got rid of you. So it's coercion just the same. If capitalism is coercive, if working for a boss or starving is coercion, then being in a socialist system where you have to engage in the means of production, with the other workers, or else you will be, excluded from the greatest fruits of labor, then that's coercion too. I don't know. It to me, I think mostly they just want to steal other people's stuff. They think up some dumbass rationale as to why. Say, oh, they're already exploiting you because they're not paying you as much as I think they should. And there's so much conceit in their opinion. I was just watching another one of them today. He seemed like a nice guy, but he's like, well, some jobs are intrinsically rewarding, and so people are automatically going to do them. And we just have a problem. How are we going to convince people to do intrinsically not rewarding jobs? Well, who the fuck are you to say what's intrinsically and not intrinsically rewarding work? There are people who like doing just about everything, and there's people who dislike doing just about everything, and it's just this The conceit, I can't even imagine where someone's like, well, the things I personally like, that's valuable, and the things I don't like, that's not valuable. Every time I talk to a socialist, this kind of bullshit comes out of there. It's so fucking arrogant. And the other thing is, it's so ironic for all these egalitarians, oh, we love all people, whatever, and they're like, oh, we're against elitism, and then, oh, whatever I think is true and objectively normative and moral, and what anybody else thinks, well, that's just stupid, and they're dumb and bourgeoisie, and they have the wrong kind of logic, and it's fucking retarded. So, just living in a house. I don't want to really make my anarchist YouTube videos there, but I'm just enjoying capitalism. The other day I ate at a Chinese buffet. We finished the well. I was like, I'm going to celebrate. It's not a bad place to have a primal diet because they have a lot of meat, although it's probably not the best kind. But capitalism's like a buffet in a lot of ways. You can look and there's just a plethora of things you can choose. And if there's stuff that for whatever reason you don't like maybe you think it's unhealthy, and I'm using food as an example. We could be talking about cars or homes or anything. Maybe you don't like the quality of it. Maybe you are ethically against killing animals. Maybe you don't like the way the workers are treated. Maybe you don't like the way farms are operated. Maybe you just don't like the guy at the stand who's selling it. Then you know what? You don't have to buy it. You shouldn't have to subsidize that shit if you don't believe in it. And if you really don't like something, you can tell all your friends not to eat it or patronize that business. And if you really, really don't like it, you can go on some kind of campaign to convince lots of people, or even launch a boycott. Boycotts are usually not that effective, but you have every right to start one if you really feel strongly about something. And the result is the only things that get subsidized by you are the things you actually value. And that means that there's a huge plethora of things available, just more variety than it can actually be sampled by one person. I mean, that's literally the case. I'm in some podunk town in West Virginia, and I cannot, even in an entire lifetime, sample everything that's available here. By the time if I were to systematically go and patronize every business, say just every business that was selling food, for instance, I could probably eventually do it. And by the time I had, so much time will have elapsed, there would have been changes to what was available. And you juxtapose this with socialism, where you have to subsidize everything, whether you like it or not. If what you like isn't in the majority of some electorate, then you don't even get it. If it's going to be based on consensus building, that means there'll probably only be one thing. It'll take forever to decide. It'll take forever to produce. It'll take forever to get. It will be so conditional whether you can even use it or not that you can't even say that you have access to it. If we're going to have a consensus building of a car, it's going to be worse than a Trabant. It's going to have a longer waiting list. It's going to be a piece of shit death trap that nobody's satisfied with, that you can't even get. And I don't know, you're just going to have to be satisfied with that and say, at least I'm not a wage fucking slave. You're just a consensus slave to the majority. It's just silly. But alright, that's pretty much it for this.